The fact that boys and men experience just as much abuse, and sometimes even more than girls and women, is something I really want to talk about. My guest today is Martin Pelders. He's a trauma recovery coach and abuse recovery coach, and he's also the founder of Matrix Men. Martin, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Sinta. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and I'm grateful that we're going to have this conversation, which is very, very important, and people shy away from talking about these topics. So let's jump in. Please tell us your story. What happened? What brought you to the point where you do this work?
Lots of trouble, essentially. Tons of trauma. So for me, it started at the age of 5. My story is a little different. So my abuser was my mother, in fact. And so she had her issues. I didn't realize that she had issues until much later in life. But the stage was set, the stage was set for me in my life and my trajectory and all that sort of stuff. So essentially what it did is opened me up to abuse from other people, because it was normal. That's what adults did to children, right? If mommy did it at home, other people could do it too. So that would happen. And in fact, I wrote an article about it yesterday where I was actually lucky that my abusers were both male and female, because I can't use the age-old excuse of all men. All men are problems. And I had to kind of navigate through life going like, okay, both women and men are dangerous. What do I do? How do I? So essentially, I broke it down to overweight women, dominant overweight women, and men with finely defined lips. That's kind of an epiphany for me yesterday whilst I was writing this. But yeah, that's what happened. So it started when I was 5. My mother was both physically, sexually, verbally, mentally abusive towards me. 8 or 9, there were 2 men who molested me. Then at 12, I got raped by, again, an overweight woman. And then from 13 onwards, I was groomed and lured in by a man who kept me trapped until I was 19. And back when I was a young man, we had to go to serve on the grens, and we had to go to do a military service. And I got drafted into the Air Force. And the very man that, in fact, was abusing me got me drafted into the Air Force. Thankfully, instead of going to 7SI, where I would have spent 3 months in Palabor and the rest of the 2 years up on the border, I got moved to the Air Force essentially 3 days before I had to report for duty. And I then went through my basics in Pretoria and spent 2 years in the Air Force band swinging a saxophone. So it turned out to be a really good time. But I came out of that, I always say that 2 years was like an escape for me. It was a chance for me to break away from Gary, my abuser. He couldn't get hold of me. We didn't have cell phones and those sort of things in those days. And during basics, I can remember I was running with, we had to carry logs and poles and all sorts of things, 2.4 kilometers, and you and your Mikey had to carry a pole. I remember running, and I looked down at my arms and I thought, I see, Martin, you're not a small oak, quite big. I mean, I'm 6'3", and I was weighing, 89 kilos in those days. I was just, muscle, and, I was not a small guy. And why, I couldn't fathom why I was so afraid of Gary. He physically was a tall man, but I don't think he was a strong man. But I was so scared of him. He controlled me so effectively. Anyway, I used the Air Force to kind of escape him, and came out, started working, changed careers every year, moved house every year, right? Until the age of 37, I think. Thereabouts. Yeah. I would just keep moving, keep changing careers, keep changing. And eventually at 37, my daughter was born, and I kind of had to settle down for once in my life. So we had just bought a house, and I bought a business, and I've been doing that ever since. but yeah, I mean, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I started drinking when I was 13. Having to deal with all these traumas and things, We always get addiction, we always blame the drugs. It's not the drugs, it's the pain that we're trying to medicate that is the problem, not the alcohol, not the drugs, not the pornography, not the sex, not the food, not all of those things. It's that pain that we suppress as men because we're not allowed to talk about things. We're not allowed to be emotional. In fact, men don't have the emotional language to talk about these things, and that's the big issue. And this is a big part of the work that I do, is trying to educate men, trying to help them gain the emotional language to be able to talk about the traumas that happen to them. And yeah, so I was a mess, essentially. I got married when I was 27. We tried 10 years, had a baby at 37, 9 years, 10 years. And but I married my mother, essentially, which is another thing I always, this is another goal of mine, is to get young people together and it was like, right, you want to get married? Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your childhood. Let's see where you guys are at, because we all resonate. And this thing of opposites attract, absolute garbage. You attract the same rubbish that you went through is going to end up in your partner, and the two of you are going to clash if you don't fix this stuff. Right? And you need to be aware of it before you get into a relationship, so that you can start mending this relationship. Because what are relationships? It's just growing together until the day you die, isn't it? So then you might as well just give up. It's just going to be this war. And that's what it was. When I started dealing with my rape, with my sexual abuse and all that sort of stuff, I was then 43, 44, that 45, yeah. Anyway, thereabouts. I was quite old. And I stopped drinking 2 years earlier, and I was still depressed. I still lay on the couch. I was still a schmuck. I really hated myself. I still woke up wanting to die every day. It was like, why am I still alive? Why didn't I die in my sleep? I was like, God, just take me away. This life is useless. It's horrible. But I came home one day and I watched the Oprah Winfrey show, and they had this chap on, Tyler Perry, and he had 200 men, and these 200 men were talking about me. I couldn't understand this. I was like, what? They're in Chicago. How the hell do they know me so well? Yeah, on the tip of Africa. And they just kept talking about me. And I was like, yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. That's me. And eventually, right at the end, I mean, they kept saying things throughout the show. They kept saying, when I was raped as a young boy, and then I go, no, that wasn't me. No, that didn't happen to me. And then another guy was like, oh, and then I was molested. Like, oh, that didn't happen to me. So even then, whilst I'm watching this and connecting with these men, I'm still in denial, right? I'd suppressed these memories so deeply that I'm still denying that these things actually happened to me. And it's like weird. But right at the end, one guy stood up. And this shows you how God, I don't know what your faith is, but I believe in, everything happens for a reason, and everything. And this guy stood up and he said, I just want to say something, that if you're a father, you would never hurt your children because you love them too much. And it was like a punch in the gut for me. It was just like, like I was winded, like somebody punched me in the solar plexus. And I just started crying, for the first time. I mean, I wasn't a cry. I was like a tough oak, And I just started crying. And the reality was that when my daughter was, a year, 2 years old or whatever, I was still in nappies, and I was changing a nappy one day. And this little devil popped up on my shoulder and he said, oh, you're going to hurt her. You're going to shove your finger in there. And I was like, what? No, I'm not. And then a little angel popped up, and it's like the comic strip, but it's real. Now this conversation is really happening in my head. And the little angel pops up and goes, you never hurt her. You love her too much, And what this guy said right at the end of the show spoke to that. The fact that I wanted to have this child so much that I spent hundreds of thousands of rands going through fertility treatments and all sorts of things. And then I get this child, and this memory, this war starts up in my head, and I'm going like, what the hell? So my way to avoid dealing with my daughter was just to get drunk. So I would come home, and instead of having a tot of vodka, I would have a glass full of vodka. And I knew that if I got drunk fast enough, quick enough, my ex would not let me touch my daughter. And that's the goal. That's what I wanted. So there I had this child that I'd always wanted in my life, right? But I wasn't emotionally available to her. I was avoiding her because I was so afraid that I was going to hurt her, you know. And the net result of that is, of course, I impacted on her life. I messed up her life mentally, emotionally. It's like I wasn't there, you know. Anyway, so the healing process starts, you know, with this, after this show. And I start delving into male survivors, the impact of sexual abuse on men and their psyche and their lives. And I start doing all this research, and I'm like surfing the internet all the time, you know. And what I failed to mention is, like, when I stopped drinking, my next addiction was pornography. I used to spend 4 or 5 hours a day on the internet surfing porn, you know. I had a wife in the bedroom, but I would rather sit in the office alone, you know, entertaining myself with these crazy, disgusting images. And my new addiction became healing. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I started surfing and researching. Eventually, I got a hold of a guy in the States called Mike Liu, and he started chatting to me, and I bought his book and read his book. And then I got a hold of a guy by the name of Ken Singer, and I got his book and read his book, and I just learned to know. And the night, I remember it was about 6, 7 months in, and I was sitting there just reading a story online, and all of a sudden, the story was about me. I don't know if it was an actual story or if it was something that was in my head. To this day, I can't tell you, but it was exactly, it mirrored my life. Exactly. It was like, I'm in the bath. I'm a little boy. I'm 4, 5, 6 years old. And I'm in the bath, and I can hear her come home, and I start panicking. I was like, no, she wasn't supposed to be home early. And now I'm trying to wash myself quickly so that I can get out of the bath and get into my room and hide, you know. But next thing, the door's locked. But next thing, I hear this coin in the door lock, and the door opens, and she comes in. Ah, you're in the bath. Yeah, Lemmy, you don't know how to wash yourself. And then she starts. So, and I just started remembering these things that she did to me, and I just started crying. And it was so difficult. And I remember I looked up at the sky and I said, God, why did you, well, I see you. God, why did you let these things happen to me? It was just a child.
Mm.
And like, honestly, didn't expect any answer, but I got one, which said, if it hadn't happened to you, who would go on to help others? And I was like, what? So, and it was weird. In one sentence, kind of fixed my past, gave me hope, gave me a future. And that night, Matrix Men was born. I decided that if recovery was that difficult for me, and I consider myself to be quite a strong, resilient person, how difficult must it be for these millions of people who are alone out there and don't know who to talk to? So I started Matrix Men back then, and that was 2011. It was about a year after I started my recovery journey. I started Matrix Men. So I made very sure that when I was going to go into this and be an activist and support men and all that, that I wasn't going to use their stories to heal me. I find that very disturbing when people start using other people to heal themselves. If you're going to help people, make sure you freaking healed yourself. You know, make sure you've dealt with your stuff before you go and offer to be the expert in your field, because you're just going to do damage. And so I was very careful to make sure that the majority of my triggers had passed, the majority of my healing was done, you know, that I could live for 6 months at a time or 3 months at a time without a major trigger and a major meltdown, you know, before I started, you know, helping other people. And that's kind of, yeah, that's what I've been doing for the past 13 years now.
Wow. Martin, what an incredible story. And I want to just thank you for being so open and honest about your experiences. This is what needs to happen. Men need to be able to speak openly and honestly about what happened to them. So thank you very much for that. I'm very grateful for that. And I also want to just acknowledge that you have experienced horrible things, and that nobody deserves that. These are things that shouldn't happen ever. But I so love what you said when you asked the question, why did this happen to me? And the answer that you got was, if it hadn't happened to you, who would go out there and help others? And that That really resonates with me also, because I have a similar story to yours. And yes, if we hadn't experienced these things, I don't know whether we'd be able to help other people on similar
Mm,
journeys. So it's an interesting response that you got, and a question that I've also asked many times in my life. Why did I have to go through all those things? You know, it's so unnecessary, and my life could have been so different. But then that's the foundation of the meaning and the purpose, and my calling for myself as well. So thank you
yeah,
for that. That's really
yes.
valuable.
Mm,
Tell us then, so you said you had to do a lot of healing to make sure that you are healed enough so that you don't use other people to heal you.
mm.
Can you give us an example? Maybe share a bit with us. What did you do? Is there any specific therapy, any specific work process, practices, and things that you did that you would recommend to others?
Yes. I didn't even realize it. I mean, academic trick, you know what I mean? When I grew up,
Yeah.
it was, dude, you're not going to varsity. We don't have money for that sort of stuff. So
Mm.
just like make the best of it and go out into life and do your thing, you know. So um weird thing is that like at 16, I always knew I wanted to go into healing. I don't know why. Right.
Mm.
So the guy that was abusing me used to pose as a homeopath, and I used to help him and do manipulations and chiropractic manipulations,
Sure.
mixed medicines, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, I was
Mm.
pretty darn good at it. And he was he was a con man, all in all. But I kind of developed this passion for healing. I suddenly knew that this was something that I wanted to do. But at the time, I was kind of I was in a technical high school studying hotel management, right?
Mm.
So it wasn't, the two were not synonymous with one another. So I then left and went and redid Standard 9. That's how old I'm, grade 11. And but this time with maths. And after the first term, the principal came to me and he says, I think you need to stop doing maths. And I said, why? He says, well, your average is 0. So you're not getting this, you know.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, what the hell? Anyway, life, yeah, we go on our journeys, right?
Mm.
But then I discovered when I was in my 40s, as I said, when I started my healing journey, that psychology was actually kind of where
Mm.
I wanted to go, and life coaching and that sort of stuff. Now, I'm not a great fan of the way that they teach these things in universities because, along with my gift from my childhood abuse was something called ADHD. And
Yeah.
everybody sees it as a curse. I'm blessed. I think it's a gift. It allows me to see things in such a different way. And I can take things from natural treatments, natural therapies, from chiropractic treatments, from my brain is like losing it, from psychology, from acupuncture, and all these sort of things. I
Mm.
involve the nervous system, involve everything. And I take all of these things and I bring them into a space. And
Mm.
I go, okay, these are the things that I feel will work for the people that I'm working with,
Mm.
So one of the biggest things, and I didn't even know it was called this, but I've been doing it for 13 years, narrative therapy, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So tell your story again, tell your story again and again, again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear your story, admit, bring out more memories, stir up all those memories, open those little files that are stuck in the back of your head, and open up all those subconscious drawers that men have, and let those traumas out. Just talk about them, right? Okay, done, right? We've spoken about what happened. Who are you now? What is your life like now? What are the dysfunctions that you developed from that childhood? What's happening? Well, I have addiction, I'm addicted to porn. I have ADHD. I have what OCD. I have. Okay, let's talk about that. I see women in a different way because I'm so addicted to pornography. Okay, let's talk about it. I cannot regulate when I get into an argument, so I end up losing it, punching things, whatever. I have anger issues. Okay, let's deal with it, right? And then the third phase is, okay, who do you want to be in future? Where do you see yourself in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time? And start steering that ship. Okay, we've learned how to manage all the triggers. We've learned how to manage all the ragged emotions. Where are we going now? And so that's a great one. And through that narrative therapy, I'd use a lot of meditation, because everybody that has suffered childhood trauma, severe childhood trauma, has ADHD. And if we don't learn to meditate, we don't control this thing that goes in 5 days in different directions. You know what I mean? So we need to learn to manage our brains, and we need to keep them in trim. We all have great ideas, but then we end up procrastinating for 6 weeks and we never get anything done, right? So we need to learn to manage that. So how best way that I've learned to do it? Meditation. Art therapy was another one. Play therapy, fantastic, right? Actually getting down onto the floor and driving little dinky toys and building
Yes.
Legos and triggers so many memories and brings out so many issues and helps you to. So one of the big things I've learned early on was that men don't understand their emotions, right? So what I try to do is through play therapy or art therapy or something like that is get these guys back to a place where they feel absolute joy and happiness, contentment that only a child can feel, and get them to reconnect the mind gut, you know, because we've learned through all the traumas that we've gone through that we can't trust our gut anymore. We've learned that, you know, when my gut tells me be careful of that person, I turn it off because it's always been wrong. It's, you know, I've been told all along that I've made bad decisions. So, and we need to reconnect together and start trusting it. And play therapy helps a lot in that. And yeah, so those essentially talk, play, meditation, good diet. You know, I have 5 pillars of what I call 5 pillars of health, right? We forget that the body is one integrated system, you know, and we try to deal with it in different sections. So it's your head is one thing, and when you go to a doctor, he's a specialist in the heart, and he's a specialist in digestion, and this one is an endocrinologist, and that one's a foot doctor, and that one's a knee doctor. But we don't have somebody who sees this all as one big package, right from the top of your head down to your toes. And I kind of developed this thing where I say, I have the 5 pillars of health. You can't be mentally well if you're not physically well. You can't be physically well if you're not nutritionally well. You can't be nutritionally well if you're not emotionally well, because you eat badly, okay? And you can't be emotionally well if you don't have a spiritual grounding. So we kind of try and work on all 5 of those areas and understand that if you're eating bad food, you ain't going to have the serotonin that's going to be able to make you happy because you're eating junk, right? You know, we've now learned that 75% of your serotonin is manufactured in your gut and actually gets sucked up from the vagus nerve into the brain. You know, we used to think it was made up in the head. No, not true. So your diet is an integral part of your mental health. And we need to understand that. And I'm listening to these stories about ADHD and autism and all these things. I'm going like, change your kids' diet, take them off the freaking sugars, you know. We'll fix a lot of the world's ills if we do that. So yeah, those are the therapies that I kind of look at, and that's the approach I've chosen to take. So we'll do a lot of, you know, for instance, we'll go away for weekends, and we do a lot of hard play for men, the tug of wars, go-karting and all that sort of stuff, and just get that adrenaline up and pumping, and then come back and say, okay, you know, around the fire, let's talk about tough stuff. And it's amazing how men unpack, you know, given that safe space, then and the ability to speak freely. Oh my word, they don't shut up. They're worse than women, which is, you know, which is a good thing. You know, we want them
It's
to
a good
talk.
thing. It's so necessary, and I love what you do. It's a very holistic approach. You're covering all the bases there. What I find very interesting is that you do play therapy. I just love that. I think it's incredible. Like you said, physically getting down on the floor and playing, it's going to really bring you in touch with your inner child. And that's what we need to start tapping into the memories and things. Which brings me to what I want to ask you. You mentioned denial. I have found my own experience and many people that I've worked with, the denial sometimes goes to the extent that it's hard to even name the things that happened to us. People tend to, and I did it myself also, downgrade it to something less than what it actually was. And I had to turn 50 something before I could literally use the words that I was raped. I used to call it other things. that were
Yes.
not so bad in my mind. And I see
Yes.
lots of people do that. What is your experience with yourself and the people that you work with? That denial is a complex thing.
Yeah, it's not just the river in Africa, right? It's
Mm,
yeah. I have a staunch rule in my groups, and the guys hate me for it initially, but they thank me for it later. So when I
mm,
was like my groups, I never have more than 7 guys in the group because you can't handle more than that. You just don't give
mhm,
everybody the attention they need. And what happens is that they go, like you say, let's soften it because then it makes my life sound nicer.
mm,
Okay?
mhm.
So, when it happened to me, and I go, what happened to you? Well, that thing. I go, what thing?
Yeah.
And they go, when that guy did that thing to me, I'm going like, no, what is it called? I insist that they call it what it is. He molested me. Okay, right. Now, the reason behind that is this, right? If I say that thing that someone did to me, it is a thing that I could have been complicit in.
Mm,
I could have played a role in that, in my brain. Now, your brain is an amazing little space, right? I would say it's a
mm.
bad neighborhood. You don't want to go into there alone, okay?
Yeah.
Vreselijke goed gebeur daar, right? My brain, you don't want to be there. It's like, yeah, it's like a city at peak hour traffic, It's like
Mhm,
all these cars going in different directions, right? But when my brain says that there was a thing that happened to me,
mm,
my brain is telling me, okay, it's not so bad. And I played a role in that because it's a thing that
mm,
happened to me, right? When I say somebody molested me, my brain changes. It goes, molestation is a crime. You're not supposed to do that.
mm.
I
Yes.
can't be complicit in that crime. So the person who did that to me is the person who's guilty. He's the one. It's the
Mm,
same with rape, When I go, let's just say it, I was
mm,
raped as a child. Okay, I was raped as a child. Fine. Now your brain switches gear. It goes like, hang on a second, that's a crime. It's not something you're
mm.
supposed to do. When I was a child, my mom used to hit me. She used to discipline me. I go like, no. Bliksem you with a pop stalk is not discipline. I'm sorry.
Mm,
That is physical abuse, right?
yeah.
No,
Mm.
that's she's beating you. She's taken her anger issues out and she's taken them out on you. That's not right.
Assault.
And we need to be honest, right?
Mm,
So call it what. When my mother physically abused me,
mm,
or when my father physically abused me, that is something that I'm not, because men would do this, they'll go like, I
yeah.
was so naughty, I deserved this discipline. They'll go like, nobody deserves to be beaten. You know what I
Ever.
mean?
Mm,
Discipline is, if you want to go and stretch it to the umpteenth degree, discipline is something that you misbehave. I calm down, you join me in the bathroom, and I give you one with a hand on the buttocks, That's discipline. Anything more than that is abuse. I'm sorry. That's, that's my approach to things. So we need to call it, you're right. We soften things. And this is interesting. I often get people phoning me. It's like, oh, I read your book. And go, I bought it because, I wanted to learn more about my partner. I was never abused. They always say this. I was never abused as a child. And they're like, okay, we'll get back to that. Right. And then they start telling me all about their partner and how like they are and all that sort of stuff. And then I let them talk and I let them talk. And then I say, can I ask you a question? I say, who does your partner remind you of, your mother or your father?
mm,
And then they stop and they go like, oh, I never thought of that. And they're like, well, what's the answer? Oh, my dad. Okay. So what was your relationship like with your dad? Well, my dad was a very angry drunk. Oh, okay. Yeah.
mm,
And he was never emotionally there for us, and we couldn't talk to him, and he was always locked in his room, or he was drunk, or Then I go, but it's kind of a form of abuse, It
mm.
is. It's neglect. It's emotional abuse. It's verbal abuse. It's all those things. But as a society, and this comes back to your point, we've decided that there's two major spheres of abuse, right? There's the physical and the sexual, and that's bad. That's abuse, right? But the
Mm,
emotional, the financial, the verbal, the mental, that's it's not so bad.
yeah.
I can deal. But what I found through my life is that the ones that I find most difficult to mend are the emotional, the verbal, all those soft abuses. Those are the worst things. I mean, here I am, 60 years old, and my mother's voice is still in my head going like, oh, you're probably going to cock this up too, you know? And I'm like, shut up, you old bat. You know, it's, we need to realize and understand that, in fact, the emotional, verbal, and all of that sort of stuff is far more damaging to our brains than the other one is, because again, emotionally, mentally, we can rationalize physical and sexual abuse is bad. It's a crime. They shouldn't have done that to us, and I'll get over it. My body will heal, right? The other ones takes a lot longer for the mind to heal. It takes a lot longer to change those neural pathways and kind of overcome those negative inputs that have been put into your brain. For me, for 21 years, you know, so, well, adding up, you know, for actually longer, 49 years, because my ex was also very emotionally and verbally abusive toward me, you know. So yeah, it takes a long time to heal those scars in the head.
It's hard work to change that narrative and our linguistic programming also that we develop around it. Something I've heard many people say who were victims of abuse in childhood. They often say, well, I turned out all right, so it couldn't have been that bad.
Yeah, justifying.
Yeah, but I like very much what you do when you go through the process and you ask, so how is this affecting your life now? And that's something I also do in my Get Up and Grow process when I help people through is we get to the point where we're saying, okay, how is it manifesting in your life now? What are your behaviors and your beliefs and your little quirks and things that you have taken on as a result of that, and then work on that. It's hard work
It is hard work
to solve every problem that has resulted from it.
Well, you know what? I always find the interesting. I always get asked this question. The guys start the process and they go, how long is this going to take? And they go like, well, you know,
the rest
for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Snap.
Yeah.
You know? And they go, no. And I go, look, let's get real. 8 months, the major things we can deal with in 8 months, right? If you really keep working it, 3 to 5 years, right? Then your life will change dramatically. You know?
Yes.
But we are on an ongoing course of healing. And we need to wake up every day going like, I want to be better than I was yesterday. Where did I mess up yesterday? Okay, there, XYZ, right? I don't want to do that today. Let me work at it, you know? And we're going to carry on doing that until we die, you know? And if you don't, then you might as well not live, honestly, because what's the point, you know?
And then we just perpetuate the trauma and we pass it on to our children.
And you become the abuser.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like me with activists. They go, like, you know, victims don't always go on to be abusers. And I go, like, rubbish, we do. Nonsense, praat nie. You come to me with these half narratives, right? So yes, I might not have raped children, but I mentally, verbally, and emotionally abused my daughter. Absolutely. Through no fault of my own. It's just I didn't understand what I was doing. And the only way that I had to respond to the things that she did was through anger and loud voices and shouting and screaming and things like that. You know? So yes, has she got issues because of me? Absolutely. You know, I mean, we wouldn't call it the sins of the father that passed down, or generational curses, or generational sin, or generational abuse, or whatever, if it didn't impact on the generations going down. The difference is I've made the choice now, but it's not going to happen anymore. I'm not going to do that to my grandchildren. I'm not going to do that to, I mean, I have a 1 and a 4-year-old now, so I'm not going to do that to them, even though, you know, I do. Yeah.
You've broken the cycle.
But I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, you know. So I always say, you know, with those anger issues I thought I dealt with, get a 4-year-old into your life. You'll see how they pull the strings and drag them out.
That's challenging, hey?
It is,
A huge responsibility to raise children because we carry the programming that we got from our parents and that they got from their parents. So we're carrying generations of programming anyway.
Absolutely.
Add to that abuse and traumatic experiences, we just behave worse and worse unless we do the work, unless we make a concerted effort to break those cycles and to do better. So we have to
Absolutely.
learn and grow. Yeah,
Yes, yes. And it's
definitely.
getting people to that point where you're just like, well, I had a wonderful childhood. Yeah, well, great. But what are those dysfunctional things, that behaviors that you have,
Mm.
that impact on your family? Let's be honest.
And we
Everybody
all
has
do.
something.
No,
Yes.
yeah, we all do.
Everybody has something.
Yeah. Martin, I'm curious to know what your view is on going forward and your relationship with parents that abused you or other individuals that abused you.
Yeah.
Where do you stand today with your mother, for example?
Well, okay, yeah, weird setup, right? I realized something very early in my journey. Somebody said something to me that stuck with me. He says, hatred is a poison pill I swallow to make the other person disappear.
Yes.
Okay. And it took me a while to process that, but I got to the point where I realized that the anger and the hatred that I carry in my heart towards the people that hurt me is impacting me more than it's impacting them.
Yes.
Right. So I got to a point with my mother and I wrote her a letter and I said, why the hell did you do this? I just want to understand. That's me. I always have this, I have the need to understand. I always look at people and go, why? Why are they the way they are? I need to know that why. Give me answers, then I'm happy. I can deal with that, So I wrote to her and I said, why? I just want to understand why. Were you raped as a child? Was it because you were in the war in Europe? She was in the Netherlands and they were occupied by the Germans. Just tell me why, Oh, rubbish, she said. And part of the thing is I said to her, don't blame my father because my father had nothing to do with your behavior. And she wrote back a letter saying, oh, rubbish, I was a wonderful mother and it was all your father's problem. It was all your father's fault. I was like, okay. I said, then you leave me no choice. So I've forgiven you for all the stuff that you did to me, but I don't have to have you in my life. All right. So she still tries. So she still tries through her cousins and sisters and brothers and whatever to needle me and get me back involved in her life. And I just go, no, I don't. So I've grown enough to have those boundaries. I'm like, until you come and apologize to me and explain to me what I want to know, I don't want you in my life. It's that simple because she manipulates. Like she puts myself against my brothers, and she always like plays one off against the other. She's a full-blown narcissist. And I understand at least that it comes from trauma. I understand that, but doesn't mean I have to accept that behavior in my life. I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to have a heart palpitation and anxiety attack every time my phone rings and it's my mother. I'm just like not interested in that kind of behavior. I choose to love me more than that sort of thing. So I've learned to forgive, mainly not to let them off scot-free, but to let me off scot-free. Right? I need to have that peace. That for instance, with Gary, I used to fantasize about murdering him. I planned it out. How I was going to do it. So if I found him, pretty much think I would have had the tools and the wherewithal to actually kill him the way that I planned, I fantasized about. And at one point I got to a place where I was like, Martin, you're a healer, not a murderer. You're a healer. You wouldn't want to murder. You wouldn't want to live with that on your conscience. You're not that type of person. And that's when I also realized that he changed the way that I thought about the world, and I wasn't going to allow him that power. I'm not going to allow people. I'm a healer and I'm going to stick to that. If he wants to be a horrible person and go out and hurt people, that's his problem, not mine. Right. But I've forgiven him. I've let him go now. And that's my approach to God. So healing and forgiveness is something I choose to do for me, not for them. So,
that's beautiful. I love how you said you realized you're a healer, not a murderer. I think it's very frustrating for people also because in many cases there's no recourse. When our abusers deny what they did, there's no accountability and there's no retribution. It's very frustrating. And there are emotions like anger and disappointment and resentment and bitterness that we have to deal with, and it's often the case.
Absolutely. But what I implore people that are victims of sexual abuse and rape and that sort of thing is that justice and healing are two very different beasts, right?
Yeah.
You could, for instance, have justice. So the guy goes to jail and sits in jail. Let's just take, for instance, I'm going to use this case because she's passed now, right? So I supported one of the victims of the Bob Hewitt, the tennis champion case, right? Supported her through the trial, and it was hell on earth trying to control this poor lady. She was damaged. I've yet to find somebody as damaged as. And she went on to do advocacy work, which I kind of went, oh my word, you know. But Bob ended up in jail. That didn't fix her. Right? So he sat in jail for 6 years and she didn't heal.
Still not. Yeah.
It doesn't make you better. In fact, they sit in jail and you're still in a prison of your own making now because they still control your life. Your abuser still controls the way that you think and see and perceive the world. And that is a bigger prison. That is a more damaging prison at the end of the day. And she ended up taking her life earlier this year. She ended up committing suicide. And very sad because she didn't have to, you know, but she didn't want to let go of the hatred. She didn't want to let go of the anger. She was kind of fueled by the fact that she was a victim. It was her identity. Outside of being a victim, she didn't know who she was. And she destroyed everybody around her, her children, her family, her loved ones, everybody that tried to care for her, she couldn't trust. And she just absolutely obliterated them, destroyed lives, left people in her wake like you can't believe. And yeah, for what? You know, only to end up taking your life because finally you get to a point where you realize that you're alone. Nobody wants to be with you. No. We need to understand that healing and justice are two very separate beasts. And if people come in and I say, what outcomes do you want? You know, I want him to go to jail. Why? Well, he can stop abusing. Well, it's a noble idea. Yes, it's fantastic. But when he's in prison, are you still going to think about the things that he did to you? Yes, probably. So is it going to change anything? So now he's in jail and you're still impacted by the way and all the things that he's done to you. No, it's not going to make any difference. So we need to work on the healing. And let's face it, I mean, the statute of limitations is now gone in South Africa, right? Or what they call the prescription period in South Africa. So if you want to, as long as the guy's still alive, you can take him to prison. You can take him to court, all right? So justice is not something that we have to get now. So I always advise the people that I deal with to heal first and then seek justice, you know. That to me is a better way of going about it.
Yeah.
If I go into court and I'm still triggered by this guy, then, you know, the advocates are going to play games with me. They really are. You know, well, but if I go into court and I'm healed and I've dealt with all the traumas, I'm very lucid about what happened to me, they can't play games with me. They can't twist my mind. They can't say, well, you know, maybe you got it wrong. Maybe you listen. Just like, dude, I've been thinking about this for 13 years now, and I'm right. You know, so you can't mess with my mind. This guy's guilty, finished, you know. So it changes the whole narrative. You now coming back. I always say rape and abuse and that sort of thing is the healing process is all about taking back my power. Right? And we do that in so many different ways. Finding my voice, getting the abuser out of your head. You know, those are the processes that we need to take back, you know. So we work through, you know, even when you write a letter to them and burn it or float it down the river or throw it up into the air or whatever the case may be. So these are all processes that we do to try and get to take back the power, to find my voice, to find the ability to say no, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the healing process is something that happens within ourselves, and we are in full control of that. So we don't need an acknowledgement or an apology or accountability or any restitution for that matter. to start
Absolutely.
the healing process, continue with it. It's
Mm.
not a prerequisite. It's not
Yeah.
required.
I mean, in terms of that sort of thing, you're not seeking outside affirmation to make yourself feel good, Even though it's still a thing I struggle with because I still like my wife to give me affirmations. I love you, darling. Like, yeah, thank you. It still feels nice, but I'm not as desperate for it now as
Yes.
I used to be,
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. I want to ask you also, do you deal with, I'm sure you do, with people who were abused as children, but they still have those parents or adults in their lives and the abuse is continuing? It might have just changed from one kind of abuse to another
Yeah.
type of
Yeah,
abuse, because some people never let up. They never stop
they
with
don't.
their abuse.
And the problem is like narcissistic parents. Oh my word. They get their claws in and they don't want to let go. And it's very difficult often because they've got their kids into a place where they are financially reliant on them, emotionally reliant on them. It's a really difficult process. And then the other thing comes in is that they can't afford to pay you because mommy or daddy control the purse strings. So I'm going for therapy. What for?
Yeah.
Well, to help myself grow and heal from what? There's no I'm all you need, that sort of thing. So yeah, very difficult space. But I must say, and I narrate this in my book, I've counseled a guy in Australia for 10 years now, probably. And it's a very difficult process because it's online and he kind of controls what we talk about. And it's a very difficult process. If he doesn't like where I'm going, he just hangs up and he goes.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
you don't hear from him for 2 weeks. And then he messages you going like, okay, can we chat again? So it's a very difficult process. But I was listening to him and he would talk about his abuse. And sometimes I picked up one day that sometimes he would talk about it in the past tense and sometimes he would talk about it in present tense. And I said, it's just like, and I listened closer just to understand, okay, am I hearing correctly? Yeah. And I listen, and I heard this past, present, in like one paragraph sort of thing. He would go past and present. And eventually I said to him, are you still being abused? And he just went quiet and he hung up.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear again for like a month. I didn't hear from him. And then he just sent me a message. He said, yes. And I said, yes, what? And he didn't talk to me for another 2 weeks. And he said, yes, I'm still being abused. And I said to him, how old are you? He said, 42.
Yeah.
And I said, who's abusing? He said, no, my uncle. I said, what's he doing? So his uncle is still raping him under the threat that if you don't give it to me, I'm going to take it from your daughter, who was 16 at the time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. So it happens. It absolutely happens. People are, man, depraved. I have seen, the depths of hell living here on earth. The things that people do to children, even adults. I mean, it's just, and this guy, now he's close to 50. I mean, he's had several heart surgeries. So, the abuse has impacted his physical health in such a dramatic way. And he's still dealing with it. He still hasn't, it would be different if he was here, and I could get him into a room and corner him and say, you're not leaving for an hour. Let's talk about this. And that would be completely different.
At least he has a lifeline in you.
Yeah.
It's difficult to work with people who are having such a hard time.
Absolutely.
They need to engage in the process, and it's painful and very hard to do that, or keep doing that, especially under such circumstances. Wow.
Yeah. But, let's not focus on the negatives. The rewards are fantastic. You know what I mean? That healing is just so enlightening. How your life absolutely just transforms is incredible. I mean, it's just suddenly you don't attract idiots anymore, You don't have these abusive people in your life anymore because you learn how to set in place boundaries and protect yourself. And, these guys that always borrow money from you, you learn to say no. I would say to my friends, no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
You don't have to explain it. You just go, no. Why? because I said no. It's that simple, you know. But yeah, it's you know, so yes, it's a very difficult process, but it is the rewards are absolutely amazing, and that's what we need to focus on.
Very, very true. And I agree with you. Tell us a good story. What is one of your favorite stories that you've encountered?
You know, I have several because it happens a lot, right? So the guys come into the groups and you see them, they dejected, they normally by the time they actually get a hold of me, they are broken. They're on the verge of absolute oblivion. And they come into the groups and they just, you know, hangdog, you know, their shoulders are down, and life is just horrible and whatever. But there comes a point, as I say, about 8 months in to the process where I get in early and I set up the room and I'm waiting there and the kettle's boiled and the coffee's ready and all that sort of, and I'm waiting and the guys walk in and you just look at them and there's this change. This amazing, the eyes are bright, skin is changed. It is a physical change.
Yeah.
You know, and I look at them and I go, yeah, they walk taller, they're happier, they're brighter, everything is just different, you know. And then I look at them and go, I see you got it this week. And they go like, yeah, I got it this week. You know, and it comes in different ways. You know, for one guy, for instance, he says he would take his family fishing once every 2-3 months. Now his children are much older now. I think it's a daughter, 2 sons, his wife and himself. And they were fishing and says he throws his line out and he gets this fish and he's reeling it in and everybody's, hey, go dad, go dad, go dad. Says the next thing the fish gets and he goes, man, and he puts his fishing rod down, you know, he reels it in, puts it down. He says, but I looked around like this, he says, and I saw my kids and my wife just backing away from me. They were all just like reversing and they had this look of absolute dread on their faces. He says, and 2 things I realized. He says, I realized how angry I was. Before I would start throwing chairs and breaking fishing rods and they were expecting that same reaction. And when it didn't come, they were even more confused. He says, but what was even more confusing is that I didn't have that reaction. You know, so I was like, wow, okay. So this healing thing works, you know. I'm getting it. You know? So that's the one story. The other guy, he came in and he was on the verge of divorce. He was on the verge of losing his 3 children, his wife, his houses. He was quite a, successful guy, but had gotten himself into massive debt with hookers. He was out, rent ladies all the time. He kind of depleted his office supplies. He slept with all the girls in the office. And that's why he was on the verge of losing his job. And he completely transformed his life. He's now present with his girls. He raises them. He does most of the work. He works from home, online, and he's there for them. When the boss says to him, hey, you've got to work, he goes like, my girls come first, and then I'll come back to you. So he doesn't. He said, I'll work until 1 o'clock in the morning. He said, but when my girls need me, they need me, you know. And he's now been on the verge of being fired from his company. He's now Africa manager for his division. So he's, you know, so his life has transformed completely. And then there's many stories like that, you know. But these are the guys that come in, that put in the effort. We need to understand that it takes effort. If you come and expect somebody else to heal you, it doesn't work. Forget it. There is no magic tablet or drug or bullet or whatever that can fix you. There isn't. You have to put in the work. You have to do the talking. You have to do the journaling. You know, that's another very powerful tool, journaling, that I insist on. Absolutely insist on.
Sure. What incredible stories. Martin, thank you so much. This has been very inspiring, and I really appreciate your contribution and you sharing your experiences and your wisdom gained from it. I'm sure this is going to uplift many people. And like I said in the beginning, this is a topic I really want to talk about more. So I'm very grateful for you joining in on this conversation in such an open-hearted manner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sinta, for the invite. And I just want to, as like a last message to South African men, is to understand that more boys are sexually abused in South Africa than girls. That's fact, right? So
Yes.
don't be embarrassed. You're not alone. You're not the only one. Trust me. There's many men out there that are going through what you're going through.
Yeah. Thank you.